Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking TRM. I can't believe that 2 weeks have rushed round again, and here we are speaking to our next expert. I always have started now introducing these people as my friends, and Patrick is no different, albeit we've only seen each other actually across a room in person, but we've done a lot of time on calls, Patrick,
Yeah,
haven't we?
a lot of calls, yeah, lots of sort of distant waving, but,
Exactly. I know, I
yeah,
scurried
I'm sure
out.
I'm sure we'll do it in person at some point.
We will. No, we absolutely will. We were there for another standard, weren't we, being launched? And I had to go and see a client almost immediately. And I sort of saw you and then just disappeared like an apparition. That's what I like to think myself. So let's just talk about how we did meet. So obviously the listeners know that we're doing some work on the standards and we're looking to develop 31030 and other standards around that area. And a few months before we started, Russell sent out a sort of call to arms, Russell Price. And I think you then saw that and then contacted me and we had a bit of a chat. And
Correct, yeah.
bless you, you never got a chance to say no. And now you're in.
Yes, yeah, both feet, I think. So,
Which is what we love. So I don't want to talk too much. It's all about the guests on this show. So I'm going to hand over to you with our first question, and I'm going to ask you to tell everyone who you are and what is it that you do, Patrick.
sure. So my name is Patrick Rogers. I suppose my official title is Head of Risk Advisory for Alert24, which is WTW's internal security and crisis management consulting practice. So WTW being the big insurance broker, formerly Willis Towers Watson. I think we did what everyone else did, your sort of PwCs and everything, and chop it all down into a three-letter acronym. But yes, we work as a operational risk treatment function within the broking arm of that business. So technically, crisis management, which is an amalgamation of us, the terror and political violence broking team, and special contingency risks, which are kind of market leaders in people risks. So particularly things like kidnap for ransom and accident and health policies, active assailant type piracy, etc. So our role within that is to help bring the operational risk piece to life. So you have all this lovely uh, insurance transfer, the risk transfer piece that comes with it, and the warm hug that has. But for the people risks and certainly the travel risk management piece, you also have the red button that you can hit on things like kidnap for ransom policy. So that operational response, which is a part of my and my colleagues' background, so supporting security and medical response in all sorts of circumstances, be that relatively benign or things like Sudan or whatever is taking place currently.
It's crazy, isn't it? Whenever we do one of these calls, I'd like to say that there isn't something going on in the world, but there always is. So when I first started doing this, we were talking about Ukraine a bit and some of the security companies and what they were having to do out there. And of course, now we're straight into Sudan. And, these, it sometimes feels, I think, when we watch things on the news, we feel shocked and that's it. It feels a little bit distant. But, you guys are involved in this because you will be helping people get out or different situations, but it just completely then kind of emphasizes actually how important this stuff is. I've been a little bit horrified listening to the news, and I know some of it's potentially a bit propagandary, but
Mm.
it's they've obviously got out the diplomats, but now they're trying to get these other everyone else out that's there, and you just think actually put yourself in that situation, that would be utterly terrifying.
Yeah,
Um, and something you weren't expecting because it all happened so quickly, didn't it? In this situation.
yeah, exactly. I think as you say, the media, this is my perspective, but the media has taken quite sort of jumped on the bandwagon of slating the government for mass evacuations, but they're very, very complicated things, and especially in somewhere like Sudan, where your aerial routes are limited, and you've got very, very long road moves through potentially quite hostile territory, etc. So it's one of the most complicated evacuation planning pieces that people are doing currently. At the time of recording, but even just ahead of that, if you are building out an evacuation plan for a scenario like this, it is incredibly complex, and you know you can't just rely on government to do that. You have to take some ownership as well, and part of travel risk management best practice, risk assess before you go. this has not come out of the blue. There have
Yeah,
been these issues for a long time.
yeah.
So
I agree, and I wonder whether sometimes we lean too much on the government, assuming that actually we're a bit of in our case British citizens, and we'll have that expectation of them just to get us out. Where actually sometimes you just got to look after yourself in these
yeah,
situations, haven't you, as much as you can. But questionably, why were you there in the first place? And this isn't Sudan. I remember when Afghanistan all closed down again, and there was a story of a guy who literally just decided to go there because he'd seen that it was one of the most dangerous places in the world
yeah,
to go to, and
the
I was
holiday
just
guy, the TikToker guy, I know.
yeah.
Um,
And I get it, but again, when it happens, like this isn't a film, this isn't a game, this is real life, and it's just
yeah,
it seems all a bit nuts to me. I would be miles away. I keep watching all these things on TV about risks. I was watching about volcanoes and earthquakes the other day, so I need to just like simmer it down a little bit because I'm not going to leave
yeah.
the house or go on holiday
Becomes
ever again.
all encompassing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
even to that point, on the operational response, evacuation response that comes with insurance policies and things, you've got your control risks and crisis 24s and SRM and others that will support getting people out. But it's part of my role is to help manage expectations of clients as well, which is you're not going to have Jason Bourne in Blackhawks and Apaches coming to get you. It's normally Abdul in his van that's very low profile, who's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
basically pick you up in the middle of the night and bundle you across the border in some way. That's often the realities of what it looks like, and in some places we talk about in evacuation as well, so hibernation really, which is sometimes it's
Okay, yeah.
better to stay still because the actual road moves or whatever it is you're going to do is more risky than staying put.
Which is kind of the advice I think that they were giving out to begin with, weren't they? They were like, just stay where you are until we can kind of sort this out because it's funny how the media turns it because it did have it, and I read it and I was quite reactionary, and I thought, hang on a minute, I work in this space. There is no way that there is not stuff happening to try and sort this. There's just no way. There's too many companies that would be, and too many people that would be too invested in anything like this around the world to not. It did feel like, we jumped on the bandwagon just to have another pop at our government, which, fine. But this isn't a political show, so I'll keep that to one side. Um, so thank you. And it was good to just dig into Sudan a bit. I mean, this is going to air in August, so it may be a little bit further down, but it's very likely, I think, that it will probably still be happening and it will have just become the norm, I guess. But right now it feels,
Or we'll
uh,
have the next Sudan, whatever that is.
yeah,
These things
exactly.
come up every 6 months pretty much.
They do, and obviously in other areas as well. So let's get into that a bit more then. So I mean, you've got a huge amount of knowledge there. You've got a huge amount of experience, and I can feel that there's a big passion behind all of this. So how did you get into all of this, and what is your why around this, Patrick? What drives you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've always, I suppose, like all things, it kind of starts with how you're brought up. Really, I grew up in a house where both my parents travelled a lot for work, and we were fortunate enough to travel a lot on holidays and things like that. So much of my upbringing was really kind of looking out um, at the world as opposed to looking in on the UK, really. So I went to university to do international business because I assumed I'd sort of follow in their footsteps to, go and sell toothpaste or whatever it is I was going to do internationally. And then I was trying to work out what to do at the end of university and decided I was really interested in lots of the concepts that I was learning about. So I looked at doing an international relations course somewhere in London, which was close to home for me. And I stumbled across King's and the War Studies Department and what became my MA, my Master's in Intelligence and International Security. So I sort of, which sounds sounds very James Bondy, but really isn't. It was actually pretty much an international relations course. It was about diplomacy. It was about some of the historical kind of legacy security events around the world and things like that. Uh, and I sort of fell into doing risk analysis and risk assessment for a couple of boutique security and crisis management companies. And I was looking at joining the Marines at one point, and I sort of had an ultimatum really, which was, can I come and work on a gold mine in Tanzania, which crossed over with the sort of selection process with the Marines, and I decided to go to Tanzania, and that was me set really. So ever since, been working with during that role in particular, that was kind of security and human rights for mega projects in Africa and the Middle East. So lots of travel, a lot of time on the road. Sort of 6 months of the year abroad. And then I went into maritime security, and then into uh, other sort of wider security and crisis management consulting. So always been on the consulting side, and I've always been traveling a lot. Um, and really, the whys is that I really enjoy the travel and things. I really liked seeing different cultures. I really liked understanding how different industries, sectors, NGOs, through to uh, state entities, through to your big multinationals, how they all operate in these different environments, and the imprint that they put on it, the people that are going there. And I was always looking at it from a security perspective, so making people feel safe and secure in these environments. And you saw the full spectrum of things. You saw some that were very experienced, and some that were very inexperienced and very nervy. So it's about helping people in those circumstances, and just the way that my career's gone. I've mentioned some of the work we've done around higher risk environments, or kidnap and evacuation, things like that. Helping people in real need, and not too many careers that you can take where you feel like you're making a tangible kind of human impact in what you're doing. And yes, I'm a consultant. I make money out of doing this, but also, when I sit back and have a beer at the end of the day, quite a lot of my day is really focused about helping making people safer, and quite often actually resolving some quite tricky situations.
A little bit different than selling toothpaste.
Yeah, a little bit. But now I work with some of the big companies that do sell toothpaste, so I still
There's
get to
nothing
see
wrong with
their
toothpaste. We all need it.
exactly. So
Um,
yeah,
but it's very, I totally understand. It's this, it's what I feel like now I've moved into this kind of the policy side, and actually some of the stuff that we're doing there too, is to be able to sort of drive this stuff forward, but just know there's a deeper meaning. I guess from my stuff, from my side, I was in the travel industry, and ultimately I love traveling too. I always have done. And I very similar to you. My mum used to take us away and stuff. She didn't travel. She was working in the NHS, but she would save up all her money and make sure that we got to see the world. So I've always had this real interest in other cultures, and I guess we're really fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to do that. But then when I started working within the travel industry, I started in adventure travel, which was really cool.
yeah,
And then I've sort of I've worked in lots of different kind of areas across it, and I suddenly thought, hang on a second, we're not brain surgeons here. We're not really doing anything that's. And I think as we've moved into an environmental crisis that we're now kind of in, it didn't start sitting so well with me that actively the travel industry is actively encouraging people to constantly travel all of the time. So
mm,
this crossover to risk for me, I get exactly what you're saying, because you feel like you're putting people first. It's also quite an interesting standard to talk about with corporates when we start talking about 31030. I mean, we've nicknamed it the people's standard. And I think as soon as you can get a standard to be about people rather than a thing, which people kind of get turned off by, you seem to get a little bit more traction, and people are able to suddenly put themselves in that situation.
I think that's a really important piece, and we bang on about duty of care with clients, and we have a global client base of all types, and you see the cultural and even sector um, biases and kind of tendencies that come up around when you mention duty of care, and some will really not understand it. Some might not understand how it fits with their business model. Why do we have to care about this when actually we need to worry about making money, and things? And that does come up, and it's a strange conversation to have. And then you've got some of the really big, like Scandinavian clients, who go above and beyond the norm, or what I would determine to be the norm, because they care, they genuinely care about their people and what they're doing. And if they're not doing it right, are very quick to address it and take it very seriously a senior leadership level. But as I say, you get others who care less, and then you've got people like NGOs whose business it is to operate in dangerous environments as well. That's their business model, if you like, which is we have to help the people of Sudan. You know, at, at this moment, so we've got to go there, but we've got to have some risk management, and typically that starts with travel risk management in place.
So, I mean, how has your role? Have you had a lot of? And I'm not trying to sort of push the standard here, but obviously we're talking about travel risk management, and we now have a standard in it. So, how have you found that in your role, having the standard actually come and be there? Has it made a difference? I think you're absolutely right. You know, you can talk to people in corporates and companies, and this is the harsh truth. So, for those listening, you know, bear this in mind. When you're talking to employees, they get it, at least they get why they should be being looked after in certain situations, and kind of have in some cases a right expectation to that. And then it comes down to how much it costs, which ultimately isn't that much per person when you break it down over a year. It's nothing compared to what people pay on Netflix and Amazon and all that kind of stuff, and don't even think about it. But of course, the standard isn't a certification yet, and I've had a lot of pushbacks. You know, how are we going to get this through if it's not a certificate? You know, all of that sort of stuff. So, how are you finding it in your world?
Yeah, so we and this is not a plug for what we do at all, but we do say gap analyses of big organizations against the standard and the guidelines that outline that. And we were doing that before the standard. We were telling them what best practice is, which we know through our own industry experience. But having the standard, being able to for us to stand behind it and say, instead of this is what Patrick from WCW thinks best practice is, this is Patrick saying this is as articulated in an international standard best practice. And some of the other bits that we can add to that then is, okay, we've seen similar types of industries and clients, etc., and how best to apply that. Maybe that's the sort of further 10%. But how clients use it and the origins of it vary. We've got some who want to use the work that we do and the standard to improve their duty of care for all the right reasons. They've had near misses, or uh, suddenly senior leadership have picked up on the fact that they're not feeling as safe as they did in maybe their old company, and why is not this in place? That's come up quite a few times. But other things is helping risk managers of all sorts within organizations get buy-in to do what they know is right and helps them in their day job. But um, quite often the bean counters will say no, and there's not real justification to them as to why. So that's part of the role that we can play, and of course the standard to say that this is what we should be doing and what we're not. Um, and some of the skill that we apply to that is also helping show value in risk management. We're always talking about the opportunity side of risk, and if you can sensibly manage the risks, travel risks, etc., you can get um, a competitive advantage in some circumstances, but also you can save costs. And we've done that with clients because we've had a good look under their travel risk management, uh, you know, bonnet, I suppose, hood, depends
Oh,
where you're
hood, I
from.
was going to say. So,
Yeah,
bonnet's good.
exactly.
Yeah,
It
that's
depends who
it.
I'm
What you were
talking
saying.
to. To me, it's a bonnet. Many others, it's a hood. But we've had a good look underneath, and we are helping them optimize their processes through the standard, effectively, to say, okay, well, you've got all, for instance, on the insurance side, you've got all these insurances that actually come with freebies and perks and things, and you've got access to training, you've got access to risk updates, you've got risk platforms that you may not be aware of and that you can use, and you don't need to spend money on others that you sort of running alongside each other. We've got others where people are taking out their own business travel insurance, but not understanding that actually the company is already covering them when they're on business travel, etc. But then they expense it back to the business. So there's a company that we just worked with who will save genuinely hundreds of thousands of dollars by just articulating this better in their policy. So we can help. Not me as such, but us as an industry, and the kind of what we're trying to do around the ISO and just more widely in travel risk management is show those efficiencies that will keep the bean counters happy, but more to the point, do the duty of care stuff that feels right and is right on a kind of human to human level.
I just completely agree with you. I'm finding exactly the same stuff. So I call it duty of care solutions selling that I think the industry has been doing for quite some time. So, you get your insurance policy, you get all these extra bits. You get your TMC, you apparently get all these extra bits. You've then got potentially an assistance that's perhaps tied into the insurance in some way. But lots of people are overlapping and lots of people are offering the same things. What is interesting when you do the deep dive is that a lot of them aren't doing it as well as perhaps the corporate thinks they are, or it's not been rolled out as much as it should have been, or perhaps it's a question of content. And actually, the assistance company is only as good as the content it receives from the TMC. And this savings piece is something that I talk about all the time. So there's always a cost involved with bringing in a consultant in to look at this stuff, or even if you're doing it yourself. For me, this, if you can reduce there, but actually then when you start looking at the travel program itself properly and taking ownership of it, there will definitely be reductions there as well. We all know people are traveling more than perhaps they should, and perhaps they don't know. They've just gone back to what they were doing pre-COVID, and because the company hasn't said, actually, we want to do this now, they've continued. Perhaps at a more stressful level because they don't want to be doing it, but there seems to be this sort of big uptake. And if you can really bring that in along and kind of get to this place that we call purposeful travel or meaningful travel, that's going to help you reduce, and that is going to pay for all of this stuff. So as much as we say, yes, it's going to cost you to bring a travel risk management program in, it is, you can definitely look at offsetting those costs by actually looking at reduction across your program or reduction of suppliers. So yeah, for me that's really important. Sorry, I'll let you have your thoughts
No,
on
no,
that.
no. I thought it was great. Also, the dog snoring as well, which is adding a lovely kind of back note to that. No, which is great though. But no, I mean, look, you hit the nail on the head, and so all these things in risk management. As I say, my job satisfaction is really high. I really enjoy what I do, and I feel like you know I get to do things for all the right reasons. But yeah, the corporate capitalist world, it's not always the same, and we have to speak to different audiences in order to get you know the actions and the achievements that we want in place for those right reasons.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think it's just a learning thing, isn't it? I think it's about the right conversations. It's about all of us being on this sort of journey, I guess, within into travel risk management to just keep moving the conversations forward. It's interesting that yeah, there's always going to be companies doing this at different speeds. Those companies that have experienced something, or as you say, have had a near miss, are going to be a lot more reactive to this, a lot more quickly, rather than those thinking, "I've never had this happen. It's never going to happen. Not going to worry about it. Let's spend the money on
Mm.
something else." So for
I mean,
me, I think
just
no, go on.
sorry, just to jump in on that point. I mean, we've noticed a big difference in some of the corporate thought process around travel risk management, which is off the back of Ukraine and some of the concerns around markets like Taiwan, which people, you know, previously would say, well, we don't go to Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan and all the others, so we don't have a problem, we don't have exposures there, do we? But um, when there's a war in Europe and there's, you know, what we perceive as sort of developed countries like Taiwan and things at potential risk who have massive supply chain issues, a lot of travelers going there, a lot of local staff plugged into different types of organizations. Suddenly it kind of brings it home a bit for them where they go, okay, well, we this duty of care piece um, is maybe more applicable than I thought about.
It's interesting. I've spoken to a couple of colleagues or friends who are doing some. Turkey's a big area at the moment. That we do a lot of events in Istanbul. We do things, and actually that's an area that people are now going, oh, this travel risk piece, actually this duty of care piece. So it's good that people are doing it. Are they doing it quick enough? I'm not sure, but there's only so much of us kind of in this space doing the things that we need to do. Yeah, I think it's about people doing the right thing, isn't it? But it's difficult when there's not enough people in the company. It's so much easier in lots of ways for those larger corporates that have got the manpower to do this. It's so much harder if you're an SME or a smaller company or a startup, and your budgets are tight, and you just don't actually have the skill set maybe to look at some of this stuff. And it's so much easier when a technology provider or some other supplier comes in and says, "Don't worry, we'll take care of all of that for you." And you just kind of let that happen because it's another thing off of your list. Whereas what we're really calling for here is a much deeper dive into what that looks like and what is really happening for your people and how your people are responding to that, rather than a tick box exercise, which I think is where a lot of companies have been for a very long time. So let's move on to your tips, Patrick, for anybody wanting to get into this space. What are your golden nuggets?
So yeah, getting into the space, I think it's about following your passions, because I think that's probably the main thing really is there's so many avenues that you can find yourself into this. We all on the ISO committee all have um, very different backgrounds and different perspectives, and quite often that's not the case, because you can come through a sort of thoroughbred line of this is what we do, and now we're going to develop an ISO around it. But actually, travel risk management takes into account all sorts. I sit on the sort of insurance and security side. There's the leisure travel, there's aviation, road travel, trains, accommodation, the tech components, communications, all these things that feed into what is travel risk management. So therefore, you can start on a career on any path within that. But if you are really interested in this, and if you're really interested in the nuts and bolts of how it comes together and keeping people safe, and that could be because of your own personal experiences or just because you're a good person. There are so many opportunities that you can take within that to get involved in the broader industry, and introducing the right practices in the right places. So that's what I would say, which I think is a great thing, that you don't have to do a master's in whatever to end up in being involved in travel risk management. You can take all sorts of paths to get there. So I think if you have the interest and the passion, it's quite easy to find yourself doing these things as well.
Oh, I completely second that. No masters over here. Just all just kind of grounds experience and really being passionate in this space and learning and wanting to learn about it. And I think I love the fact that you've picked up on the fact that it's so wide, because I think there's a story for travel risk management that it's just about security, it's just about high risk destinations, and we've got that covered. Thanks very much. Why are you all kind of going on about all this other stuff? And that's the point, because it's not just about those things. And when I'm talking to corporates, and I'm sure you have the same thing, you're bringing this. Well, it says so in the standard that you've got to bring stakeholders across from the whole business. So you could be in HR, you could be in IT, you could be in legal, you could be in, and go on it goes. I can't even think of all of the other departments that I'd be thinking of, procurement, and you've all got a reason to be part of this. So it's kind of a case of picking up arms and actually looking at what you guys are, what the company you work for is already doing, or the company that you're going to work for is doing, and then finding out how your bit fits into this piece, I think, because
Yeah.
all of it is arguably really important.
Yeah,
And
I had a conversation literally to that point with the client on Monday, which is a US based client, who said, she said to me, where does travel risk management sit? Should I take ownership of it? And I was like, well, it's not really a role. It's more of a committee within an organization. We like to box these things into, okay, well, even the travel team, you know, they're not necessarily the travel risk management team, and security aren't, and procurement and HR and legal and risk managers, etc. It's actually all of that role, all of those roles coming together in more of a committee environment to really um, manage travel risk management within an organisation appropriately.
to
So
share that responsibility ultimately, because why should it be the responsibility of one person? Because it isn't, and it shouldn't be, and it can't be. And it's you that there might be somebody heading up the committee. But no, I completely agree. So when I move into a business, normally travel is sitting in procurement or it's sitting in finance, and it's managed as a cost. That's it, you know. Even for the larger companies that I work with, if there is a security department, it's for the high risk countries they're operating in. They just haven't kind of moved this it's for everything across yet. And that's because that feels like it's a huge thing to manage. So I'm working for a company at the moment who they're operating in 146 countries. Getting a hold of this outside of the high risk feels really frightening and huge. And it is to a degree, but it's just a case of getting the framework in, understanding where you're at, looking at the gaps, and then working out how we're gonna plug them. Because ultimately, it feels like you've got solutions in place, but there are these gaps. And once you understand these gaps, we can fix them. It's just that we don't understand them and we haven't necessarily got the time to look into them properly at the moment. And that's kind of what needs to be done. But it needs to be done with knowledge. It needs to be done with a visibility of the industries that we're working with that perhaps you don't have from a client side. So it is good to work with experts to try and understand that actually yes you might have this solution in place, but what that actually means is this and this. It's not quite as cut and dry as you perhaps thought. So no, I love that, Patrick. I think I'm always an advocate for wherever, like I say, wherever you work in a business, just start looking at this because it's not it. It's ultimately about people, but it's about assets. It's about reputation, and I've looked at so many policies, as I'm sure you have. And in a business, it's only in the travel policy that travel's even mentioned.
Yeah,
Maybe a bit in the continuity policy, maybe a tiny bit, but there's nothing in data policies. And what happens when people are traveling. Like it affects the whole business, doesn't it?
yeah.
I'll let you carry on.
And I think we keep on touching if it's high risk, and we're talking about security situations, etc. But it's people working for you. You have a heart attack on a business trip to India or Paris or wherever it is. It's natural disasters. I went to Puerto Rico um, straight after Hurricane Maria, so I was on one of the first commercial flights in there, and the whole place, which is actually a very developed island. It's part of the US, but not many people in the US actually know that. But and there's a lot of industry there for around pharma. There's also a lot of investments and the insurance um, uh, companies were very interested in some of their insured assets, etc. And if they were still there, and you know. It's a Caribbean island, and there was lots of trade between it, and people got caught out. Basically, you're just your routine business traveller um, could found themselves in some really difficult situations. There were very limited resources, water, food, um, sanitation, all those sorts of things in a what was a disaster zone. So um, it doesn't have to be about going to Iraq. It doesn't have to be all these sorts of things. Even within the US, your duty of care. Again, if people are traveling for business and they break their leg or they have a heart attack or find themselves in a natural disaster, a tornado, whatever it is, um, that's all still your obligation as a corporate to be there to respond and support them.
And it's amazing how many people, when in those moments, don't know what to do. So whether they have had training or whether they haven't, it's a case, or whether they've had the information or whether they hadn't. It's a case of ensuring that when people are in high stress situations or high traumatic situations, that they still know what to do, and that comes with practice. And this isn't just let's write a policy and off we go. This is a continuous effort to ensure that your staff are aware and they know what to do because the world around us is changing. So it's something that yeah, let's hope more people get on board. More work for us, which is always a good thing. But it's something that I think that we just need to keep talking about, which is what we're doing. And Patrick, I'm just so grateful for your time today. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And my snoring little dog in the background. I think you've given us a completely different perspective. I always want to get into the insurance piece a bit more because for me, it seems like it's the biggest mystery for corporates not really understanding that bit, and certainly the travellers. It might be somebody within the business that does. So I think it's been really helpful for us to be able to do this, and I might well get you or one of maybe perhaps Nick on to do another one to dive into this a little bit further to just try and give people some more advice. I'm just conscious of time and I'm not allowed to keep going too fast. So Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. For our listeners, I look forward to seeing you in another couple of weeks and you listening to us. I know it's been a bit of a strange one today with the dog in the background, but hey, we're humans and things happen. I will talk to you soon. You've been listening to Travel Respects, and this is Talking TRM. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thanks.